I'm Mike Dowdy, and this is the School Leadership Show. Welcome to the only podcast dedicated to helping practicing and aspiring school leaders realize their potential, advance their careers, and achieve work-life balance. The School Leadership Show brings together the greatest minds from inside and outside of education to deliver you the insights and tools you need to succeed in school leadership. This is the show we wish we had 20 years ago. This show is about you. We're here to help you become the best school leader you can be while still having a life outside of work. In this episode, I interview writer, speaker, and broadcaster Merlin Mann. We talk about managing all of the inputs that come your way. We go into great depth on managing email and working toward what Merlin has coined Inbox Zero. We also talk about strategies for managing your time and attention in order to set yourself up for doing your best, most creative work. To learn more about Merlin and his work, visit his website, merlinmann.com, MERLINMANN.com. Enjoy this interview with Merlin Mann. I'm here with Merlin Mann. Merlin, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
So you are a writer, speaker, broadcaster. Can you tell folks a little bit about the kind of work that you do?
Sure. Yeah, most of what I do these days is with podcasts. I have a handful of podcasts I do with some of my friends, some of which are about work stuff and some of which are just fun, silly things. But my background that kind of led me into that stuff was writing for the web, where I used to do a site called 43 Folders. That's a site about personal productivity and creativity. I did a thing some people have heard of called Inbox Zero, an idea about how to deal with email. Because I've just always been interested in how to get better at work and how to get over the barriers or perceived barriers that keep you from doing the stuff you really want to do, which still really interests me today.
So are you still keeping up 43 Folders or no?
I am not.
You're not? Okay.
Yeah, I haven't posted to it in years now.
Well, and I was just poking around on it, and I thought it was pretty neat, the whole name for 43 Folders. You want to tell people where that came from?
Oh, sure. Well, there's an old idea that I first learned about from a book called Getting Things Done by David Allen, but it's a very old idea of being able to kind of physically portray the upcoming month and year of what you have to do through a series of what ends up being 43 like manila folders. So you have a folder for every day of the month and then a folder for each month of the year. And if there's something that you want to do on a future date, you just put it in that folder. So if you have something you want to do on the 3rd, you put it on the 3rd of the next upcoming month, you put it in the folder for the 3rd. If you need to do it in October, you put it in the folder for October, etc. And so then each day you open up the folder for that day, move it around. You know, it's kind of it's sort of an artifact from a time when we had more physical stuff, papers and things like that, bills to pay, physical things. But I liked it because it brought together two ideas I like a lot, well, probably more than two ideas. But the idea of getting things done, that book, a really sane way to think about your work, but also just kind of simple ways to improve what can often be a complex problem, what some people call life hacks. So some kind of a clever, sometimes elegant, sometimes inelegant way to take something out of your brain and put it into the real world and find a fix. So, yeah, that's where that comes from.
So now, do you use that anymore? A tickler file like that? You don't?
Tickler. I haven't used that in years. I use a lot of text files. I use my calendar. I have a variety of places I put things, but not too big a variety because I'm really a fan of, in the same way that I would only want to put my fork in the fork section of the silverware drawer, I like to have a fairly small number of places where I know stuff can and should go, and that's the only bulwark I have against insanity.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about that? So kind of that idea of grouping like things together or having one place for something. How does that play out when you've got stuff coming in at you either on paper, email, maybe it's over Twitter? How do you manage that?
Yeah, it's a terrific question. And I think it's a common cause of people feeling unproductive or feeling overwhelmed or feeling like they're procrastinating is, that terrible feeling of being overwhelmed by too much stuff and not even knowing where to begin. So I guess I'll again, take a page right out of David Allen's book here and say that, when stuff comes into your life, whether that's an email or a bill or a note from a student's parent or whatever that thing is. It's a good practice to collect that all in one place that we'll roughly call an inbox, whether that's a physical inbox or an email inbox, and to go through that on a regular basis and say what needs to happen in the world as a result of me getting this input. And sometimes the answer is nothing, and you delete it. But I think the goal is to minimize the number of places where you put stuff, where you allow stuff to collect, and then to make a practice of saying, on a regular basis, I'm going to decide what needs to be done, and to the extent possible, try to never touch something twice. Or once again, to quote David Allen, you should never have to think a thought twice unless that's a thought that you enjoy thinking. So whenever something comes along, and I still practice this throughout the day with email, is to try to decide, is there anything I need to do about this? Well, emails is sometimes where that thing needs to be, but often that's something I need to go. In this case, like today, like I mentioned before the show, I need to go to the library today to get a book for my kid. Well, that goes on to a to-do list. That doesn't belong in email. Figuring out what I need to get for my wife's birthday, that doesn't belong in email. Getting a request to be on your show doesn't really belong in email. Once you invited me on your show, I added that to my calendar. So I think that one way to keep your head above water from a tactical standpoint is to be as good as you can be about deciding where something needs to go based on what needs to be done about it. And once you start approaching your work that way, first of all, you realize how much stuff you have, and is that really tenable? Well, if it's not, you need to make some changes at a higher level. But just in terms of getting the stuff on your plate, off your plate, just deciding where it goes and then doing something about it and moving on.
So let's talk about those decisions. I caught two of them. So something comes in, you mentioned it could go to the to-do list, it could go to the calendar. What are some of those other decisions or places where things go after they come in your world?
Well, that's a very good question, because again, to return to that complexity that people feel, you start to feel like anything could come from anywhere and then have to go anywhere. But in truth, when you're actually on top of your game, you realize there's only a handful of things that you do really during the day. There are exceptions. Maybe jury duty comes along. Maybe you have a vacation. But by and large, there's only a certain fairly finite number of verbs in your life, regardless of how many nouns are getting thrown at you. You got to write an email. You got to make a call. You got to run an errand. You got to, all those sorts of things. And figuring out those verbs in your life is a big part of it. It's one thing to think that any verb in the dictionary could apply to me, but when you really realize that like over 90% of the verbs in your life are probably 5 to 10 verbs, and then those verbs are what really, and I don't know if you know what I mean by that, but send an email, go to the gym. There's these like specific physical things that we do in the world. Once you're aware of those outputs and where that stuff needs to go, it becomes more sane to decide where something should go. So that's why I push back a little bit sometimes against people who feel overwhelmed but still insist on keeping every email in their inbox and then like kind of just scrolling through them all day. For myself, that makes me feel really crazy. So just deciding what the verb is, then it's just a matter of having a system that makes sense. You have a calendar, have a to-do list. If it's a reference kind of thing that you need to share with other people. In our case, that might go on with a magnet on the refrigerator. It's not complicated, but it's only complicated in your head when you think that anything could be anything, because that again will make you feel crazy.
Well, and it sounds like if people take the time and expend the mental energy to think about those decisions ahead of time, then it's going to ward off the decision fatigue of having to really think about each thing every time something new comes in.
Yeah, and that's actually ties in with another great concept from the Getting Things Done book that I like a lot, which is that, part of your work as a knowledge worker, or whatever you do as a knowledge worker, part of your work is deciding what your work is, deciding what your work should be, deciding what the next task that you need to work on is. That is part of what you do. You don't want to spend all day just, churning that stuff around. So what it allows you to do is work somewhat modally, is the way I would put it. So there's a part of your day, maybe in the morning, you say like, okay, here's a couple, 3 things I definitely need to get done today. Some of the stuff I'd like to get done. Let me put that in the right place. Now let's go into a work mode where all the writing stuff gets done when I'm writing, all the calling stuff gets done when I'm calling, and et cetera. So you don't have to be tightly wound to find that useful. It's just a matter of saying, like, to live in a constant state of just stirring your email around and seeing what looks most scary is not a sane way to live.
And that whole idea of batching, of, like you said, doing like things together, Makes sense. And so let's get after it then, because email is the bane of many school administrators' existence. And I would a couple of months ago have put myself in that category, but I've tried to tame it a little bit. So you've got some school administrators, and I've seen it. I've seen their inboxes that are up over 1,000 messages, or they're getting hundreds of messages a day. What can you tell them? How can we help these people overcome that addiction to email?
I would say, first of all, I just want to acknowledge that what you're saying is, in my experience, extremely true. It's not just people in business. It's people I know who are teachers, people I know who are academics. Some people I've talked to tell me they feel like email has become a second job, where they've got the job they would have had 30 or 40 years ago of preparing classes and syllabi and meeting with students, et cetera, and now they have this new job, which is a kind of ongoing customer support or tech support, where teachers feel like, they're not even looking at the syllabus. It's just easier to text the teacher and ask or things like that. I know that varies a lot from person to person, but, I can tell just from watching the principal at my daughter's school. My daughter's in elementary school. There's just, the principal and teachers at her school. I can't even imagine how much input they get. So, one way to face this, I'll start with the depressing part. And the depressing part is that we have no control over other people. We like to think we have control over other people. But as long as you have any inbox in your life where something might show up that you might need to know about or do something about, maybe, that's going to be a source of anxiety and incompletion. So even if you've informed or educated, if you like, all of the parents about how to contact you, there's still always a chance that stuff's going to get lost. It's going to show up at a weird time. Crazy demands are going to come along. And people don't always know that when they're asking you something, it may not be a convenient time for you to deal with it. It might not even be your job. You might be, an email about the core curriculum is not something you can do that much about, because core curriculum is core curriculum. With that said, I do think it is very helpful in any relationship, including in education. It's very useful to try and be clear about the preferred avenues, how you'd like to be contacted, and then what people can expect as a result of that. So, in the same way that you might say to the babysitter, hey, text us just to say the kid's okay, but, call us if you are worried about something. But you know what? If the kid fell out a window, just call 911, then call us. Like, there's a certain amount of common sense, but you want to let people know how you prefer or, how you like to respond. So if you end up having this Wild West where people are texting you and maybe even contacting you on Twitter, or we use something called School Pages as a site that is used at my kid's school, there's innumerable ways to get at somebody. And I'm trying to avoid using the word train, because I think that puts it too strongly. But if people do text you and you respond immediately, well, you're establishing a pattern. Not just that you care, but that's the way you want to be contacted because you responded. So I think it is, even though you'll never fix it 100%, you can get 50% or more of the problem sorted by having clear avenues of communication and saying, if you need me right this second, pick up this phone. If it can wait, email me here.
So
if it's something that we can...
Yeah, so setting expectations, basically. So
setting expectations, yeah. In some cases, another thing I picked up, probably from Getting Things Done, from Getting Things Done, I think, but something I call, David Allen calls the agenda, which is just this idea that you don't need to contact somebody the very second that an idea occurs to you. If it's not something critical, why don't you write that down on a list? If you know you have a teacher conference, and again, forgive me, all I know is, having an elementary school age kid. But, if you know there's stuff you want to talk about and it's not super critical today, why not put that on the list and mention it on pickup day or mention it at the next conference? It's a two-way street, and then in the way that you choose to communicate with your students or their parents or other stakeholders, you have to realize that we're all, whether we like it or not, we're all in this alone together. We are all in this community of how we communicate with each other. So, it's a problem that we can't solve, but it's a problem that we can at least partly ameliorate.
Well, and I think about, like you have a checkup with your doctor once a year maybe, or once every 3 years. I'm not texting my doctor every time I think of something that is bugging me, right? I'm thinking about these things, maybe hopefully writing them down and then having the conversation with her at the checkup.
You're probably doing what I do and just Googling it to find out whether it's deadly.
That's true. So, all right. So let's say, you get folks to kind of go down that road on setting the expectations for email, let's say. And then, all right, now how do I deal with that inbox? How do I get to inbox zero?
Right. Well, I guess I feel like I have to just underscore this. I've often said in the past that I feel like when you send someone an email message, it's a little bit like handing them a pebble, where to you it feels like this impossibly tiny, lightweight, easy thing, but you may not be accounting for how many pebbles other people are sending to that person too. You may not, may not be doing the mental math of going, well, if every parent or guardian of the 30 kids in this class sent one email a week, that's at least 60 emails a week, let alone the people who are already emailing every day because that's just how they roll. So, like I say, it helps us in a weird way. It helps to start understanding that it might be an impossible situation in the sense that it can't be ever finally fixed. What I would say is that, and this goes to the sort of inbox zero concept that I kind of cobbled together. If you get an email from somebody and you're in a position to respond very quickly to it, and you think it's something you can just knock down right then, I would just say don't wait, don't flag it, don't put it in a folder, just send a quick response. If it's something that gets CC'd to 50 people, I would be reluctant to jump in on that because that's probably going to be the kind of person who sends you a whole lot of junk. You have to use your own common sense and judgment. You don't want to seem glib, but that's again one of the ironies of email is that we claim that it's important, but then we don't treat it seriously. If email were as important as everybody claims it is, we'd all be better at it, but it's not. So we act like it's important. We have to check it all the time, and then we don't do very much with it in a timely fashion. So, ultimately, communication is about communication. I know it sounds like a tautology, but just sending a bunch of email to a bunch of random people is not in itself communication. Sometimes that communication needs to be, hey, look, I know this is important to you, and it can be very important to me, but we need to have an avenue that's going to make this scalable for both of us. So, let's be honest, email is not an electronic media problem. It's a people problem. If email weren't about people, we wouldn't feel bad about it. It's just sometimes you do need to really then communicate with somebody and say, hey, you're sending this, I'm getting an awful lot of stuff. Do we need to have some kind of a talk about this? But, you don't want to be, again, you don't want to be flippant or unkind, but I think you have to manage that expectation with people. And then as far as how to get to the inbox zero, whatever works for you. If you don't mind having thousands of emails in your inbox and you probably don't need to worry about it, I would say ask around and see if other people think you're great at it. But, try and be quick in your responses. Know when to escalate it to a different medium. Sometimes a phone call is going to be actually a lot faster in the long run than an email, a bunch of emails back and forth would be. Become very particular about the people who you pay a lot of attention to. If there are certain, what you might call important people, don't feel bad about dealing with their emails first. There's nothing wrong with treating different people differently. If a stranger keeps bugging you about something, how would you treat a telemarketer? Would you still feel like you have to give them the same amount of attention? We're grown-ups. We have to make these decisions. But again, keep it short, keep it professional, and keep it moving. If you need more information, knock it back into their court. But, also realize and accept that that you're never going to be in a situation where it's all just easy. But when it is difficult, understand the part that's making it difficult and address that rather than thinking that just getting a new app or a new system is going to help.
Now, have you ever experimented with the Yesterbox technique? Have you played around with that?
Remind me what that is.
That's where, I use Outlook, so where you basically collapse today. So you don't see anything that's coming in today. And today you work on everything that came in yesterday. So you can clear out yesterday because nothing else is going to come in yesterday. And then tomorrow you deal with what came in today.
I think that's an interesting idea as long as, quote unquote, dealing with could also mean just deleting or archiving. I think, I do think that the most email messages have a shelf life, whether we like to admit it or not. In my experience, a lot of emails lose a lot of their value after about 36 hours, especially in a high, traffic environment. So I don't think that's a terrible idea. I think if you have the will to not look at those emails from today, you're better than a lot of us. A lot of us couldn't avoid looking at those new emails and at least reading what's in them. But I don't think it's a bad idea. I think definitely, you don't need to start with email that's 30 days old and work forward because there's a higher and higher chance as it gets older that that's something that's either settled, not relevant anymore, however you want to think of it. But no, I don't think that's a terrible idea, what you're describing. I don't know. There's just something to me that cognitively it helps me a lot to know that I've done everything about everything in my inbox by the end of the day. Even if sometimes that means kicking that email to next week because it's not anything I need to do anything about or want to do anything about before then. So there are various tools that can help a lot with that, but it all comes down to having a view of that email and those people that you can live with.
Any tools that you found particularly helpful that you might recommend?
Yeah, some things are a mixed blessing. I mean, I use a couple different apps because all my email syncs. I can use whatever app I want, really. But, I on my phone sometimes I use Mailbox, which is an app by Dropbox that is not getting a lot of current development, but that's the main app I use for just going in and checking, and if there's something that I can just archive, I archive it. It also has the ability to snooze the email. And I know there's a lot of different things that can do this, but that's a mixed blessing because sometimes I'm just procrastinating, but it is sometimes very helpful. If I'm on vacation, for example, or let's just say I'm out of town, and I know there's nothing I can do about it, and it doesn't really need a response, but I can deal with it later, I'll just kick it into next week and then deal with it then. The ninja trick is to realize how often you've been kicking the same email for 10 or 15 days and realizing you're probably not going to do anything about it or you already would have done it. That's helpful. There are other kinds of things. Some people really like SaneBox a lot. Increasingly, a lot of my friends are moving a large amount of their internal stuff to something like Slack, some kind of an app or a service that's really designed for collaboration rather than thinking of every email as being this precious snowflake, something more informal. But I don't know, for folks in education, I'm not sure what the answer is, but the biggest thought technology you can bring is to come up with your own attitude and workflow that you can reapply every day without feeling like a burden or a chore.
What would you say to those folks who have hundreds of folders and they spend time archiving their stuff into individual folders?
I personally don't find that useful. But I wouldn't want to speak against anything that works for people. It's just that, search has come such a long way. Searching and filtering has come such a long way between Outlook and Gmail. Well, in my case, Gmail. I can find anything I want in Gmail way faster by searching than I can by looking at a folder. So, I think some people have a certain kind of organizational tick where they've been doing that since the early to mid 90s, and why would they stop? That's what they've always done. If it works for you, that's great. I find it cumbersome, and the question you might want to ask yourself is how many times a week do you use that folder structure to find something versus just having it be a little ritual that you enjoy.
So you get that little hit of dopamine.
Right.
So I want to transition a little bit here. You talk a lot about time and attention. So,
right.
How do you, what's going on with that? What do you, what's your thinking around that right now?
Well, I think that when you look at the world of personal productivity or office productivity, really since the industrial age, there's been a lot of focus on the idea of time and consequently on the idea of time management, which you would want to see expressed as efficiency or effectiveness. And so most of the interest in time management has been about, well, how do you manage your time? Do you use a calendar? Do you have, all this kind of stuff? And I think that's very important, but I think it goes hand in hand with attention management. And the more I think about time and attention and how we use both or apply both, the more I really feel like they're so inextricably locked together that it's difficult to really separate them. Time is an existential resource for actually accomplishing anything. But attention is this much deeper thing. It's what you learn. It's what you see. It's what you do. It's whose help you ask for. So I feel like it's, if you don't manage your time well, you may never make anything great. But if you don't manage your attention well, you'll never make anything great. You need both. It's hard to know if you're doing a great job if you're not managing your attention. You can become extremely efficient at doing something that nobody particularly cares about, but you're so efficient with your time, you never even notice it.
So what are some of the biggest time and attention managing mistakes that you see people make?
Well, one of them is this is just in my own experience, is a purely logistical problem of, people who are smart enough to use a calendar, but not quite maybe smart enough to treat it seriously. So, for example, and again, this goes straight back to getting things done, a book I can highly recommend. But I never put anything on my calendar unless it is going to die if it doesn't happen at that date and time. So only things like appointments or, go on a calendar. Unless you have a dedicated calendar. I have a dedicated calendar called Environment, where I just put things down like, oh, go see if this payment cleared. Somebody's going to be in town. Like stuff I don't need to do anything about on that day, but it's just when I want to check in. But I would treat a calendar very much as the existential landscape. It's like this is the stuff that is not allowed to die. So that to me is for people, I guess the anti-pattern then would be people who go in and block out 3 or 4 days to write a novel. Don't do it repeatedly and then feel bad about it, but keep doing it. That's, that was I think of it as a little bit like going to Whole Foods and buying $200 worth of produce and putting it into a crisper that's like full of rotting food. If you put good food with the rotting food, you're not going to want either. So, be careful and be slavish about that. So time management to me ultimately is about a certain amount of very clear-eyed understanding of what you have committed to, and a very mature understanding that most things take longer than we expected. So it takes a certain amount of the temerity to think that your time is valuable, but then also the presence of mind to say, well, did I check the calendar the day that I agreed to do this thing? Am I out of town that day? I rarely talk about anything related to time without having a calendar in front of me because I just know better. And then with attention management, well, that's just a matter of, feeling like, how do you know you're doing the right thing? How do you know your time is being well spent if your attention isn't well spent? So, the classic sort of, whipping boys for stuff like this are whatever, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, whatever. We want to always yell at these sites that are out there distracting us. Well, it's difficult to be distracted from something that you really care about. The only time that we're distractible is when we don't care that much about what we're doing. So in some ways, attention management also comes down to care. It's a matter of saying, well, if I'm not that engaged with what I have on this list, on this calendar, on this to-do list, that's not really a Facebook problem. That's a me problem. So I need to figure out either how to care more about what I do or how to do something that I care more about.
Makes sense. Now, there's so much content out there, related to, we're kind of talking about productivity and stuff, but just in general, there's so much content out there. How do you curate what you focus on, or how do you filter what's coming to you so that you can, pay attention to what matters?
I think it helps by realizing that even though there will always be more stuff than you'll ever see, there are probably some things out there that you can decide for yourself that are just not anything you need to follow. So for me, things like sports, celebrity gossip, politics, those kinds of things, are a kind of interesting sideshow that don't have a place in my life. So just by dint of the fact that I don't follow those 3 topics, I end up having a lot of filtering built in. As far as finding good stuff, I look at what my friends do. I use an app on my iPad called Nuzzle that shows me things that lots of my friends have linked to on Twitter. So that's an interesting way to at least, find stuff that's out there. I subscribe to some RSS feeds that I like. And then I'll do stuff like, honestly, I'll just wander around the library and see what's new. But, I think we all have, the thing is, it's because there is so much stuff out there and we feel so much need to consume it, with the whole fear of missing out idea, just figure out what you're more than happy to miss out on. Throw that stuff away and then focus on the stuff that's really exciting and split that time between the stuff that is valuable. And then make sure you set aside time to go learn about things you don't know yet. Keep an open mind about what's out there, that just because it's not familiar to you doesn't mean it's not interesting or relevant to you. Because if you think about the stuff that you looked at 20 years ago, well, there's probably a lot of stuff in your life now you wish you knew about 20 years ago. How do you find that stuff? So talk to your friends. Find out what's interesting to them. Find out what they're excited about. Ask for, band recommendations. When you go to conferences, talk to people about, how they do this sort of stuff. And then, again, have that kind of be full of yourself enough to realize that your time and attention are valuable and that you have to set and honor that budget all on your own.
Well, I think that's what people, I think that's a big mistake people make, is they don't take control or keep control of their time. They kind of, let that go, let other people fill it up instead of deciding what they want to spend their time on.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I mean, if you don't value your time, it will go wherever people want it to go. So, then the key becomes, how do you do that in a way that's civil and kind, and how can you be useful even if it's not the perfect thing for your job? But that's, that's a personal commitment and integrity issue that we all struggle with.
I want to be sensitive to your time because I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. So I want to finish up with a 3-2-1 here. So 3 podcasts that you would recommend to folks.
Wow. Okay. Slate Culture Gap Fest on the Panoply Network. Boy, why didn't you tell me about this? I'd be better prepared.
No, just see what came to mind.
Yeah. Slate Culture Gab Fest. If you like Adventure Time, there's a really Adventure Time TV show. There's a really great podcast that will be returning soon called Conversation Parade. And what's another one I really like a lot? I really like Accidental Tech Podcast.
What's that?
Those are three.
What's that one about? The Accidental Tech?
Oh, that's Accidental Tech Podcast. That's Marco Arment, John Siracusa, and Casey Liss do a very entertaining and thoughtful weekly podcast about kind of what's on their mind in the world of technology. It's not headline obsessed. It's more sort of what those folks are interested in. But three really smart guys and a good way to spend your time.
And your podcast, you can have shameless self-promotion. That's fine. You want to talk about?
Nah, that's all right.
Okay.
That's okay.
All right. How about two tools that you would recommend? And it can be related to productivity, or it can be, something totally different.
Okay. One is, even if you are really good with electronic media, I think it's a good idea to always carry around. I want to say just a paper and pencil or a paper and pen. I always have a notebook and a pen. In this modern world, nobody ever has pens. So, like when I go to sign my kid out of school, I'm glad I brought a pen. If you start carrying a little bit of paper, some kind of could be index cards, could be a little notebook, and a pen or pencil with you, you will start finding ways to use them in ways that are really gratifying. So I'm going to count that as one tool. What is my other tool? I'm looking around my office and trying to see something that I think is really great. I feel a little bit on the spot. I guess I will say try the new Amazon Echo. It's like $150, but it's a really cool dingus you can talk to, and it can control stuff and play public radio, and you can order things from Amazon from it, and it's totally frivolous, but really, really fun.
Oh, nice. And then one book you would recommend. You mentioned Getting Things Done already, so I'm not letting you use that one. So what?
Okay, no, please, yeah.
So what's one book that you would recommend to folks?
Let's see. I guess I will say there's a lot of books I like a lot about writing, and some books that I like a lot about sort of the creative process. I'm trying to avoid talking about comic books because I know people don't like when I talk about comic books. I guess I will toss out, I'm going to say Bird by Bird by Annie Lamott, which is a wonderful book on writing.
Okay.
And a wonderful book on actually getting some writing and some drafts accomplished, even if you think you're a terrible person and don't deserve to be good at what you do. Bird by Bird.
Bird by Bird. All right. Well, Merlin Mann, thank you so much for taking time to help aspiring and practicing school administrators do their jobs better. Anything else? Any parting words that you didn't get a chance to mention that you want to make sure people leave with?
No, just to say, whether you're aspiring or actual, thank you for your work. I have a tremendous respect and gratitude and sympathy for people who are doing anything with education today. And so thank you for what you do, and I hope it goes great for you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks for listening to the School Leadership Show, a podcast for aspiring and practicing school leaders by school leaders. Send your comments, questions, and show ideas to mike@schoolleadershipshow.com. And now it's time to rate the podcast in iTunes and leave a comment. No, really, it's time to do it. So when you're done here, go right to iTunes, rate the podcast, leave a comment. Thanks.